Canadian Bulldog for wrestling merchandise and memories. That's merchandiseandmemories.com. Now that we're on the road to WrestleMania, it's time for a very special list as we count down the top 50 worst WrestleMania matches. That's right, it's Worst-leMania. And in coming up with this list, we looked at the following criteria. First, was it expected to be a decent match? Did fans feel disappointed or ripped off afterwards? Is the match universally known for how bad it was? And did it do anything to further a wrestler's career? Just before we get started, wanted to remind you that Wrestling Merchandise and Memories has more than 100 unique top 50 lists on site, everything from top rivalries to top superstars of different promotions to WrestleMania moments. Check out bit.ly/top 50 lists for more. Number 50, Tito Santana versus the Executioner. There's something fitting about the very first match in WrestleMania history landing in the 50th spot on this list, as the bout wasn't expected to be very good and delivered. The Executioner was Buddy Rose under a mask, and he and Tito Santana put on an unremarkable 4.5-minute contest. Number 49, Uncle Elmer versus Adorable Adrian Adonis. This WrestleMania 2 match featured two of the larger athletes on the WWF roster and lasted only 3 minutes due to the relative lack of skill of the hillbilly Uncle Elmer. Despite Adrian Adonis, who could actually move around for a man of his size, taking several bumps, he was able to put away Elmer relatively quickly here. Number 48, Bam Bam Bigelow versus One Man Gang. What should have been a grudge match between two of the WWF's best super heavyweights was cut short because of the time constraints surrounding the WrestleMania 4 World Title Tournament. Bam Bam and the gang went less than 3 minutes before Bigelow was counted out, and so One Man Gang advanced. Number 47, Velvet McIntyre versus the Fabulous Moolah. Although this was a world title match to kick off the Chicago portion of WrestleMania 2, this wasn't exactly of a Bayley versus Sasha Banks quality. The champion Moolah pinned McIntyre in 1 minute and 25 seconds, despite the challenger having a foot on the rope when their pin was counted. Number 46, David Sammartino versus Brutus Beefcake. Unlike some of the other matches here that ended quickly, this WrestleMania 1 match went almost 12 minutes, despite neither wrestler having the endurance or talent to do so. Sammartino, who is the son of Bruno Sammartino, ended up getting disqualified, as did Beefcake, rendering the lengthy match completely pointless. Number 45, Hacksaw Jim Duggan versus Bad News Brown. Another double disqualification here, although this WrestleMania 5 match featuring Duggan and Brown was expected to be a great brawl between the two veterans. Instead, we were just given under 4 minutes before both wrestlers decided to get DQ'd, and the feud was over before it began. Number 44, Doink and Dink versus Bam Bam Bigelow and Luna Vachon. One of the least anticipated matches on a packed WrestleMania 10 card was this mixed tag team match where the pint-sized Dink could only wrestle Luna Vachon, meaning Doink the Clown and Bam Bam Bigelow only faced each other. The match wasn't even overly comical, possibly someone's idea of a bad joke. Number 43, The Natural Disasters versus Money Inc. At WrestleMania 8, WWF Tag Team Champions Ted DiBiase and Irwin R. Shyster took on Earthquake and Typhoon, and Money Inc. ended up being counted out of the match to end it. Number 42, Coco Beware versus Rick Martel. The opening match at WrestleMania is typically used to get the crowd psyched up, but this one at WrestleMania 6 fell short of accomplishing that. Martel was a year removed from any significant push he would have received during his model gimmick, and Ware was a jobber to the stars by that point at best. Number 41, Junkyard Dog versus King Harley Race. One of the most disappointing matches from the iconic WrestleMania 3 lineup featured rivals Junkyard Dog and Harley Race battling in a loser must bow down match. Race won the match in about 3 minutes, but JYD refused to bow, rendering the stipulation useless. Number 40, Big Boss Man versus Akeem. As the Twin Towers, Boss Man and Akeem had terrorized the WWF, and it was expected that their eventual breakup would be a big deal. Instead, their match at WrestleMania 6 was treated as an afterthought, with Bossman winning in less than 2 minutes despite pre-match interference by the $1 Million Man. Number 39, Corporal Kirchner versus Nikolai Volkov. Kirchner was brought into the WWF to take over the Patriots role from Sergeant Slaughter, so a flag match against the hated Russian Volkov made perfect sense. The match only went a mere 2 minutes and 5 seconds. Number 38, Hillbilly Jim, the Haiti Kid, and Little Beaver versus King Kong Bundy, Little Tokyo, and Lord Littlebrook. This mixed tag team match at WrestleMania 3 featured Hillbilly Jim and Bundy, each captaining teams. When Bundy got too physical with one of the little guys, both his teammates and opponents abandoned the walking condominium. Number 37, The New Day versus the League of Nations. Going into WrestleMania 32, The New Day were WWE Tag Team Champions, but they were quickly jobbed out to the League of Nations, including Sheamus, Alberto Del Rio, and Rusev, which led to random appearances by Hall of Famers Shawn Michaels, Mick Foley, and Stone Cold Steve Austin. Number 36, The Red Rooster versus Bobby the Brain Heenan. While we don't have a particular problem with squash matches, the appeal behind this match at WrestleMania 5 was to watch the Red Rooster get revenge on his former manager, Heenan. Instead, the Brain was pinned in about 30 seconds with no real torture. Number 35, Rocky Maivia versus The Sultan. Who would have imagined that The Rock's WrestleMania debut would have been so unspectacular? As Intercontinental Champion, Maivia was defending against The Sultan, who is Rikishi, in a match that had no build-up, no drama, and very little to it, even with The Rock's father, Rocky Johnson, and Tony Atlas being at ringside. Number 34, Don Morocco versus Dino Bravo. While there were several mediocre matches in the WrestleMania 4 WWF World Title Tournament, the first round contest between Morocco and Bravo had to be the worst. These two power-based wrestlers lumbered around for a few minutes until Morocco won by disqualification. Number 33, The Bushwhackers versus the Fabulous Rougeau Brothers. At WrestleMania 5, this tag team match was expected to be a little bit of comedy relief, but instead, you had Jacques and Raymond Rougeau going almost 10 minutes with Luke and Butch, longer than it should have gone, and the Bushwhackers won, which made no sense whatsoever. Number 32, The Allied Powers versus Jacob and Eli Blue. The Allied Powers were Lex Luger and the British Bulldog, who had both been in top WrestleMania matches before, but at WrestleMania 11, they were relegated in the opening match in an unremarkable win over Jacob and Eli, aka the Harris Brothers. Number 31, Tori Wilson and Sable versus Stacy Keibler and Miss Jackie. While there are some women's matches in the early days of WrestleMania that you can excuse, the competitors at WrestleMania 20 were at least 4 women who had wrestled before, but this Playboy evening gown match still managed to disappoint. Number 30, Rugged Ronnie Garvin versus Dino Bravo. While both Garvin and Bravo were accomplished wrestlers, their WrestleMania 5 match had very little substance to it. In fact, the highlight wasn't even part of the match. It was the WWF return of Superfly Jimmy Snuka right before the match started. Number 29, Ryback versus Mark Henry. You'll notice that higher number WrestleManias are somewhat less represented on this list because most matches there range from decent to great. But this WrestleMania 24 match was an 8-minute plotting affair, and more importantly, Henry surprisingly went over, killing Ryback's momentum. Number 28, the Headbangers versus the Godwins versus the New Blackjacks versus Furnace and LaFawn. This Four Corners Tag Team Elimination match opened WrestleMania 13 and really didn't do much to get the crowd on its feet. Number 27, Genichiro Tenaru and Koji Katayo versus Demolition. Outside of Japan, most fans had no idea who Tenaru and Katayo were, so it made little sense for the non-WWF tag team to somewhat randomly debut at WrestleMania 7, defeat Smash and Crush of Demolition, and never be heard from again. Number 26, Men on a Mission versus the Quebecers. Because it was the 10th edition of WrestleMania and taking place in Madison Square Garden, one would assume that the WWF could have come up with 2 better teams than Mo and Mabel and Jacques and Pierre to compete for its tag team championship. Yet this match ended up with the Quebecers being counted out and retaining the titles. Number 25, Tori versus Sable. When WrestleMania 15 came around at the heart of the Attitude Era, Sable was arguably one of the WWF's most popular stars and the WWF Women's Champion. But it made little sense to have her defended against Tori, a stalker character that wasn't able to make Sable look good in the match. Number 24, Head Cheese versus TNA. One of the many tag team matches at WrestleMania 2000 featured the comedy team of Steve Blackman and Al Snow against Test and Albert. But the only highlight of the match happened after Head Cheese lost, as they took out their frustrations on their temporary mascot, Chester McCheeserton. Number 23, Atom Bomb versus Earthquake. An incredibly quick match that took place at WrestleMania 10. In just 35 seconds, Earthquake was able to vanquish the up-and-coming Atom Bomb. Had it served a larger purpose, fine, but this did nothing to further either man's career. Number 22, Big Boss Man, Sergeant Slaughter, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and Virgil versus the Nasty Boys, Repo Man, and the Mountie. This WrestleMania 8 match tried to squeeze 8 mid-card wrestlers together and failed miserably. Number 21, Christy Hemme versus Trish Stratus. When WrestleMania 21 rolled around, Stratus was doing her best work as a heel, but instead of giving her an opponent on her level, they fed her to the Raw Diva Search winner Christy Hemme, who couldn't provide Trish with a decent match. Number 20, Batista versus Umaga. Considering the names involved, this WrestleMania 24 match should have been better remembered. It was WrestleMania's first Raw vs. SmackDown match for brand supremacy. Not only was SmackDown not the supreme brand, despite Batista, their representative, winning, but the match just didn't feel as important as it should have been. Number 19, Jake the Snake Roberts versus Rick the Model Martel. At WrestleMania 7, these two were finishing a long, heated feud in which Martel had blindsided the Snake. But in this match, both competitors were supposedly blindfolded, making a grudge match appear to be more like a clumsy game of pin the tail on the donkey. Number 18, Mr. Perfect versus the narcissist Lex Luger. Both men had been world champions before entering the WWF, and this was one of WrestleMania 9's marquee matchups, but the two never seemed to click at all, with Luger getting the win after nearly 11 minutes, and the two stars never competed against each other again. Number 17, Ashley Massaro versus Melina. Although women's wrestling has come a long way in WWE over the years, WrestleMania 23 featured a women's championship match with every WWE diva at ringside, and the title bout only went 4 minutes. Number 16, Demolition versus the Powers of Pain and Mr. Fuji. One of the biggest feuds in the late 1980s featured Axe and Smash against the Warlord and the Barbarian, which heated up when Demolition's manager Mr. Fuji turned against them. But this 3-on-2 handicap match for the titles at WrestleMania 5 was hurt by the aging Fuji donning the trunks. Number 15, Braun Strowman versus Goldberg. WrestleMania 36 was set to feature new Universal Champion Goldberg defending the title against Roman Reigns, but Reigns pulled out amid the pandemic, and Braun Strowman as a substitute was disappointing, vanquishing Goldberg in 2 minutes in an empty arena. Number 14, Butterbean versus Bart Gunn. Gunn had proven himself to be the best real fighter in the WWF during the Brawl for All tournament. However, the former Smokin' Gunn was no match for the supersized boxing champion Butterbean, who knocked him out in 35 seconds, destroying any hopes that Gunn had for a push. Number 13, The Undertaker versus Big Show and A-Train. Look, The Undertaker's career at WrestleMania has become synonymous with top matches, but this WrestleMania 19 one left a lot to be desired. Originally a tag team match, Taker's partner Nathan Jones was taken out at the last minute, and the Dead Man took on 2 opponents, but there was little doubt who would win. Number 12, Kane versus the Great Khali. At WrestleMania 23, WWE was attempting to replicate the iconic WrestleMania 3, complete with the giant Great Khali being slammed in Andre the Giant's place. But the match between Khali and Kane went 5 minutes and 31 seconds, which was probably about 5 minutes and 30 seconds too long. Number 11, Akebono versus The Big Show. Now, had this WrestleMania 21 match been Akebono versus Yokozuna in a sumo match, which is impossible because Yokozuna had died 5 years earlier, this would have at least made sense, but matching the sumo star Akebono against the giant Big Show not only hurt his credibility, but it also gave the fans the haunting image of Big Show in a thong. Number 10, The Boogeyman versus King Booker and Queen Sharmell. The Boogeyman was a comedy wrestler with very little upside when he appeared at WrestleMania 22 to challenge the husband and wife team of Booker and Sharmell, but Boogeyman dispatched the 6-time former world champion and his wife in less than 4 minutes. Number 9, Trish Stratus, Snooki, and John Morrison versus Team LayCool and Dolph Ziggler. WrestleMania 27's attempt to infuse some star power into the proceedings took the form of Nicole Snooki Polizzi from the television show Jersey Shore. While Snooki wasn't the worst worker on this list, the entire celebrity concept fell flat, and the backstage tension between Morrison and Stratus was quite apparent. Number 8, The Undertaker versus Big Boss Man. Another Undertaker match on this top 50 list, this one from WrestleMania 15. Typically, a Hell in a Cell match is used to settle a score between hated rivals, but Big Boss Man was just kind of acting as a pawn for Vince McMahon here, and sadly, Boss Man was hung by a noose after the match. Number 7, John Cena versus The Undertaker. This is a bout that has Dream Match written all over it, yet the two weren't able to deliver in their very brief WrestleMania 34 match. Leading into the show, they made it appear as though the dead man wouldn't even show up, which in hindsight may have been a better finish. Number 6, the Miss WrestleMania Battle Royal. Talk about the ultimate FU to women's wrestling. Most Battle Royals are harmless fun, but for this one at WrestleMania 25, WWE didn't even bother to tell us which competitors were in the match, even while they were on their way to the ring. Despite having women from the past and present wrestle, the winner was Santina Marella, the sister of Santino. Number 5, Bret Hart versus Vince McMahon. It's easy to understand why this WrestleMania 26 match was so underwhelming. Bret Hart was clearly not in any condition to wrestle, but a grudge match that had been building for over a decade was reduced to Hart sitting in a chair while various members of his family took turns beating up Vinnie Mac. Number 4, Hulk Hogan versus Yokozuna. WrestleMania 9 had been built around WWF champion Bret Hart defending his title against the massive Yokozuna. When Yoko won the belt through nefarious means, Hulk Hogan materialized out of nowhere to protest the result and ended up defeating Yokozuna for the championship in mere seconds. Some main event. Number 3, Daniel Bryan versus Sheamus. Speaking of mere seconds, 18 of them were all it took for the world title match between Daniel Bryan and Sheamus. It was a terrible way to start the show, and fans protested the result of the match. Number 2, The Undertaker versus Giant Gonzalez. Our fourth match in the top 15 featuring The Undertaker took place at WrestleMania 9, where the dead man wasn't touting any sort of streak, but still was being pushed as the top attraction. While the visual of Undertaker facing off against the 8-foot-tall Gonzalez was impressive, the Giant could barely move around. And number 1 is Bill Goldberg versus Brock Lesnar. Taking away nothing from their later encounters, the first clash between Goldberg and Lesnar at WrestleMania 20 was terrible. After building it for months and adding Stone Cold Steve Austin as special referee, both men had indicated they were leaving WWE at the conclusion of this match, so the Madison Square Garden crowd practically booed both men out of the building. Which picks did we miss? Which picks did we misplace? Let us know in the comments section below, and be sure to check out merchandiseandmemories.com for lots more great content.